We're all a little depraved and debaucherous. Here is the king of podcasts.
And now the Depraved and Debaucherous program is going to profile. We're not going to salute. We're not going to overly condemn. We're just going to make the point of talking about Dan Schneider, the producer that is now being caught under fire in the new bombshell documentary on HBO Max and Investigation Discovery, Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV, where there are a lot of his stars that he had on the set and people that were behind the scenes working on the show. They don't have nice things to say about him. Dan Schneider is the kids' version of Harvey Weinstein. I mean, there's not even a doubt about it. This guy has been tainted. He has been run through the coals because they have had a lot of allegations. For whatever reason, he has not been hit with a lot of lawsuits where he can be taken down. This guy survived all of them. For why, I don't know. But listen, I'm not one to go ahead and be sanctimonious here, try to be some puritanistic kind of person and get feign outrage like some of these other folks on social media. I'm not doing that. Okay? This is an adult show. Right? It's 18 plus. We understand and we can tolerate certain behaviors that are depraved and debaucherous. This right here, no. You want to do this kind of behavior amongst adults? Sure. But amongst children, absolutely not. And the other thing too that must be mentioned is that when he did these shows, some of the things they mentioned, the double entendre, some of the sexual innuendo that was on these shows, which I admit, when I watched these shows in my 20s, I was a little bit older, but I still passed by these shows because you still can't pass by on cable without passing by these shows because they were somewhat entertaining. Listen, they wanted to make these shows so that kids and adults could watch together, or teens and adults could watch together. And they did. And trust me, there are a lot of millennials out there that they still praise these shows and they still praise these stars after all is said and done. And we've seen some that have gone through hell and they have not come out of it any better. Let me tell you, every time I look at Amanda Bynes, I'm like, damn, poor thing. I mean, she must have run through the coals. What kind of trauma and what kind of crap she went through to see her. I mean, just a complete shell of her former self. The voice is still there, but like, she's just not her. What in the world was done in the career in Hollywood to put her in this space right now where she's at? And of course, others made it through okay, and some were just child stars and never really made much else after that. I mean, some getting a chance because of the renaissance of all these shows coming back, where Zoe 101 makes a way back, or iCarly makes a comeback. And you see this here. I mean, there's just a thought process of like Dan Schneider, of all things, this frumpy kid on the Head of the Class TV show in the 80s. Well, a show which I actually watched for a number of years because it was pretty funny, and then it kind of went downhill, just kind of like lost its luster. They changed Howard Hessman, like I'm not watching. Okay. And the show was fine. And then I didn't think that him and Brian Robbins, his fellow co-star on that show, became producers and started working on all that, and then just created the ensemble show, created the Saturday Night Live type of feel. And then comes in here and like, okay, we're going to just start spinning off shows. And they did. And for Nickelodeon, I mean, this guy did a pretty good job with what he did. But you have to be some kind of nut to put the shows that he put on. Because now we're realizing that there were a lot of things that he did on those shows that we realize, oh shit, this is kind of fucked up. Now listen, I am not someone that's going to get on this show and start condemning and start, crucify. I'm not going to be doing that kind of stuff, okay? Oh, outrage the humanity. I'm not doing that either. This is an adult show. If for the most part, all of you that are listening to this program are over 18 years old, okay? Because that's how I position this program. It's explicit. Unless you catch it another way, but that's another thing. But for me, I put the show out here. And I think about the fact that Dan Schneider, I mean, being in Hollywood and being under that spotlight and being the chance to be noticed for your work, I mean, he has to get some credit for what he did and for some of the shows he created. And some of those stars actually look like they turned out okay. And some of those others, I can't tell you what happened. But this is where child stars in Hollywood can just be eaten up and be destroyed on a regular basis. We don't see a lot of shows like that anymore. I mean, with Disney Channel, you kind of feel like there wasn't anybody that had that kind of effect like that. But it was that competition. Nick and Disney having their own shows like this, and they had all these stars. But remember, the child stars, let's just be honest, we see child stars all the time that they go through a mess, and they're nothing like what their former selves. Let's not forget. Demi Lovato and Miley Cyrus over on the Disney Channel, look at what they've turned into. Like, I mean, they've transformed so many times, and like, they are nothing even close to what they were at the beginning when they were on their shows, respectively. It's all changed. Like, there's only the handful that we see out there that have been able to go and make it through pretty much okay. Didn't look like they got too much damage, but the environment that was created, okay, it's a big kid, acting like a big kid, thinking that some of his behavior, like, because again, it's locker room behavior. All right. We know we hear that phrase, in the political cycles, but like here it is. Dan Schneider was just playing like he was in high school. He's going along like a kid like the others, but he's also got this sick, twisted mind of his, okay, where he can act like he can start thinking some stuff like a kid or accept ideas that kids might be vibing into. And he took some of that. Some of it worked. Some of it was really fucked up. Let's just say it like that. So now, to get ahead of the second half of Quiet on Set, because Drake Bell is going to start opening up about what happened to him with Brian Peck, the executive producer on, forget what show it was, but one of the guys that Dan Schneider had and his team. We already heard from the writers, a couple of the female writers that got really run through the coals as well. And from some of the other stars that got shelled for others because of who was, the it girl, the it boy on those shows. Like there was a lot of that going on too. But yeah, what I must say, and I will only say this in a light that you have to be amazed by how this guy was able to get away with all this. Okay. The one thing that really does stand out was like the most, like, besides the Fear Factor stuff, besides, what they did with the Ariana Grande having, pickles and potatoes going through doors and glory hole thoughts and all this shit. Okay. But it is something to be said about him being clothed in a hot tub with Amanda Bynes and the thought process behind that. Again, what he got away with on camera. But then there's also, what was he saying backstage? What was he saying in the writer's room? What was he saying that nobody got to hear or see, for that matter? Not to mention, what is this guy, his appetite like sexually? Because, this is the kind of thing where he gives a big vibe like a child pedophile. He really gives me pedophile vibes. He gives me feel like this guy could be loaded with child porn. All right. Depraved and debaucherous for us, depravity and debauchery and all this kind of sex and sugar daddy stuff we talk about on a regular basis. Totally fine amongst adults, amongst consenting adults, amongst responsible adults. But this right here is a level of depravity and debauchery that's like just unspeakable. Should not be happening. Could some of this been, maybe coincidental? I can't say it would be that much. I can't give that much to coincidence, and I can't just assume that some ideas might not have been thought through after a while. Maybe at that time, because if you can get away with it, listen, we know that these kind of shows couldn't have been done like that again. Not in this time. Oh no, not this sensitive fucking crowd. Any of these shows would have been canceled by now. But it was the late 90s. It was the early 2000s. And you know what? There was a lot of sex stuff going on television. Okay? Talking about depravity and debauchery. There was a lot of that going on. A lot of glorification. Sexual glorification. Like, this is the time of what? Girls Gone Wild and Jerry Springer and Maury Povich. And come on now. Like, we had some real wild shit going on. Okay? Making Spring Break and Freaknik look like, patty cake compared to that. But what is funny is the fucking audacity of Dan Schneider doing this planted interview right now to create some sympathy for himself. And by the way, couldn't help but notice that it was on his YouTube channel, which I don't know if anybody else watches his YouTube channel. I didn't even know he had one. But of course, every Hollywood rag got their hands on it and posted it on their site and just reported away. Now, of course, it's because it's a news story. But it's also like, you're going to use this story and going to put it in there and let him speak. And this is just some planned interview. This is not Hollywood Reporter or Variety or whatever doing the interview. No. This is Dan Schneider planning this interview. Okay. When you think about what this is here, this is like, okay, let's make him look normal. Let's make him look like, oh, you know, what kind of guy was this? I mean, he is apologizing a bit to it, but of course, only as much as he has to. And how much is this is damage control by his people to make sure that, listen, you need to go ahead and keep an eye on the Golden Boy because, you know, he might be fucked in the head, but he has been cranking out some good shows for us. Okay. That might be the thing that they need to be worried about. And that's the part that everybody's all concerned about. And as far as I know, I believe, I don't know if he's still working right now, if he has any other projects he's working on as we speak, but now he puts out there. And by the way, he got a lot of press from speaking out and saying what he said. And so people are all responding about this. Okay. So the YouTube video was done on Schneider's channel. Boogie, who plays Tebow on iCarly, and Schneider's reps said they wanted to make clear that he is not a journalist and wasn't trying to be upon doing the interview. Yeah, so they wanted to make it where this is like very natural. Get one of his former child stars that people might recognize and say, hey, you know what? Do this for me. Like, is there going to be a kickback for Boogie over here for doing it? I don't know, but, you know, we can kind of just analyze the interview because I have that 20-minute interview up here. We're not going to hear the whole thing, but I'll take some clips from it and see how it turns out. But this is what's being done with it. Let's just take a little listen to it.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played Tebow on Nickelodeon's iCarly. I got a chance to watch the Quiet on Set program, and I reached out to Dan to see if it was something that he'd be willing to discuss. I'm pleased to say that he said yes. Dan, how are you?
I'm okay. I really appreciate you reaching out and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about what we saw over the last 2 nights.
Do you honestly think Boogie right here all of a sudden wanted to go ahead and like do something to kind of help out Dan? Like, what kind of deal was made for this guy to going to be planted over here? I don't believe the way they kind of just set that up. But look, they set up the apology. And this is where Dan Schneider would at least kind of give a bit of a mea culpa. Is it legitimate? Is it heartfelt? You decide.
I'm glad you're here because I believe this is important.
For sure.
We've got a lot of things to unpack. But before I dive into my list of topics that I'd like to discuss, is there anything you'd like to start off with?
Absolutely. Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology.
Let's talk about the massages.
Okay.
Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing.
It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation.
See, the thing is, you can go ahead and let the guy just kind of tee up softballs for him to get to that question. Listen, I'm a journalist, okay, at heart. And for me, you know, if you want to get into the whole point of the allegations, I'm not here to go and ask gotcha questions, but it's like you could set up a little bit better. Like if Dan Schneider really wanted to go ahead and get in front of this, the problem is there's just not a good interviewer out there that can handle this kind of interview. Like, who do you have out there he can go to right now that will be good, that can handle this discussion objectively, but ask the hard questions? We don't have Barbara Walters. And by the way, Matt Lauer is as much of a fucking lush as Dan Schneider is, so that doesn't work either. I mean, put him on 60 Minutes? I don't know. But they put it here because they thought this might work. And I'm like, well, you can see what happens here, but I don't know. There's more to be said about this. Let's just take a little more of what he talks about. Now, what's smart about this interview is that Dan Schneider made this a 20-minute interview. So you can definitely go ahead and catch the whole interview in a pretty quick run through and not go through too much. So I get what he tried to do there, but let's go into more of it.
With that said, Amanda Bynes was brought up in the series and her emancipation and how you were involved in that. Can you talk to us about it a bit?
Sure. Amanda was between the ages of 16 and 17, and she wanted to get emancipated from her parents, which was a fairly common thing with successful young actors, at least at the time.
Sure.
And she wanted that for herself.
But now, do we know that for sure? I mean, sure, we've heard the story where there is that narrative. You know, we've had cases like this all the time. We hear about where, like, I mean, Gary Coleman was one of the greatest examples of child actors, got thrown into the mix and didn't have any money coming out of it, you know, because of what happened in the career and how, you know, child stars will have their income languished. It'll be just used up because the parents were so frivolous and so irresponsible and so, you know, depraved and debaucherous themselves with what they did with just like spending the money and expecting the kid just to be a cash cow and that's it. Like, that's pretty messed up. Going along.
So she turned to her team, which included her lawyer, her agent, her manager, her publicist, me, because she included me as part of her team, thought of me that way. We supported her. She tried to get emancipated. It ended up not working out.
But now the thing is, it still comes down to the fact that who put up this idea to go and have her go through this and see what happens? Like, it's those things we just got to look at and just say to ourselves, there's something more to this that we're missing out on. Just saying.
We've got a lot of things to unpack. But before I dive into these are all first-time writers.
All first-time writers looking for their first gig.
Got it. Now, in the series, they also highlighted 2 black actors who said that they felt overlooked. Now, I want to be clear. I'm never going to speak on anyone else's journey. Yeah, I can talk about my experience, how my experience was with you, what I saw prior to working with you. But again, I don't want to speak on anyone's journey. I saw you be honored for diversity in your work.
Yes. And the reason for that is diversity has always been very important to me in my shows. If you go back to the very first Nickelodeon show I ever made, that's very evident, as it is in the second one, and then the first movie I ever made for Nickelodeon, which starred Kenan and Kel, and every show I did after that had a lead black actor in it. I'm very proud of that. It's very important to me. And not only am I proud that they were in my shows, I'm exceptionally proud of the achievements they've had beyond my shows, and they've gone on to bigger and better things, and that gives me a great sense of pride.
Do you think that Dan Schneider was responsible for creating diversity on these shows? Listen, it's obvious that on all these shows, I mean, listen, with the change of the millennium, the change of the decades, there was also still at the time of the 2000s, change of the times. Like, you needed to go and diversify cast, that you wanted to make sure that what you saw on television represented what everyday kids saw on TV, or they would see in their high schools, in their elementary schools, or just out and about socially. You know, before iPhones, before the internet really being as prominent as it is. Like, the thing is, you wanted to see what the makeup of what everyday people got to see. And that's what all those shows represented. But it's also what the initiative of Nickelodeon Studios wanted to do. They said, we need to go and do this. We need to make sure we get our audience out there to go after, you know, and show what the makeup of the crowd should be. And it can't just be where, I mean, listen, let's just put it like this too. Disney Channel might have had certain shows that they have on, and you know what? I don't know how much diversity is on those shows. I'm not going to point fingers. I'm just saying Nickelodeon, counter programming, counter culture. That's what they were doing. And that's not Dan Schneider. Dan Schneider's just taking credit for that.
Well, something that really kind of bothered me was how they depicted your relationship with the cast.
Yeah, it bothered me too.
Yeah, just me being there, I knew the dynamic was trust. I understood that in situations where they may have had turmoil, whether it be with their families, whether it be other castmates, they came to you. Versus how they made you look. With that said, Amanda Bynes was brought up in the series.
Okay, so as he goes along and talks about that, I'm still saying the thing is, I look at, it's so convenient to go and see Boogie here. Go ahead and just position. Like, it's all positive and happy talk and making Dan Schneider look like, oh, I'm not the bad guy. Look what I did for people, okay? And it's interesting. Let's see the way they can just twist this shit around. Fucking narcissistic, manipulative bullshit right here. Let's just say it like it is. This is a masterclass in that. Dan Schneider has found a way to keep himself unscathed for a long time. Okay? He's been around this way too long. He knows how to go ahead and protect himself. It's criminal-minded. It really is criminal-minded activity that, you know, if you're going to do it like this, you got to just find your way to like not get noticed and to be able to avoid everything that's going to happen. That's pretty depraved and debaucherous. But he's doing it from a way of like, okay, we really don't know the truth about what's going on. I don't trust this guy. I think he's shady as fuck. And I know he did some shit wrong. In Hollywood, it's just, of course, you just can't say it. But there's enough people rallying up here to go ahead and say something. And that's the part that sucks more than anything, is that how many people have to go and wait to say something before they can actually go ahead and open up. Like, the problem is, it's this damn documentary that had to go and come out all of a sudden to finally open up. And I forget who did this documentary, but it's like, it's the same people that did the R. Kelly documentary or whatever else is out there. Like, just to, if you need to expose somebody, you need to put a spotlight on somebody that's going to really, you know, the expose that's really going to be the point. That Quiet on Set is completely defaming, dishonoring, and trying to destroy the credibility, the pedigree of what Dan Schneider created on all those shows. He deserves it. Okay? He deserves it. We can see that there's part of this that's in there that we need to go ahead and recognize and just realize, okay, something's not right about this guy. Way too many people are saying it, okay? He don't have enough allies like Boogie right here that'll just like, I'm sorry, kiss ass, because he's doing it. That's what he's doing right here. And there's no one should be defending this man. Dan Schneider cannot be defended for being depraved and debaucherous, but that's what he is. More of the interview.
I'm going to do what most showrunners do, which is, you're not on the set. There's a director there to shoot it. I'll go up to the writer's room. I'll work on the next script. But because everybody was so used to me caring about every detail of every show so much, for me not to be on the set, maybe some people thought I got banned.
So it was more of an assumption because this guy's usually here and now he's not.
I don't know if it was an assumption. I don't know if somebody thought they were making me look bad by saying I got banned from the set. I have no idea.
Okay.
All I know is I was never banned from the set.
Yep. The darkest part of this series discussed child predators. Now, I want to make sure that we clear a couple of things up.
Okay.
You just can't ask the question. He has to just put some disclaimer out there. Boogie has to do this on behalf of Dan Schneider. He has to put a disclaimer out there to protect Dan Schneider. Doesn't vibe well with me. It doesn't pass the test. There's something wrong here. So let's hear the disclaimer, because even trying to do this right here and just not asking the question flat and not just trying to ask, hey, what about these allegations about Brian Peck and other people on these programs? No, we have to set this up. But again, this is on Dan Schneider's channel. So completely planned, completely contrived to try to save face. I don't think it's going to work, but let's play it.
Brian Peck was not hired by you.
No, I did not hire Brian Peck.
This was a Tolan Robbins production?
Yeah. And when Drake and I talked and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. And I told him, I'm here for you. What do you need? Which Drake mentioned in the show that we watched last night. And next, I heard that he went to court when this guy was being tried, Peck. And when Drake walked in, he saw 50 people sitting on the side of the courtroom supporting Peck. A lot of them pretty famous. Of course, Drake was devastated that happened. And even more disappointing, 41 of those people wrote letters for Peck, character letters, praising him for who he was. And
by the way, I bet you those same people would also write the same letters for Dan Schneider if he ever got caught up in any allegations. But you just can't pass the buck and say, oh, okay, well, I didn't hire him. He still worked in your programs. Like, he was still part of the whole fold of anything that's got your name on it. It doesn't matter. When things start getting a little bit awry and the investigations start coming along and some stuff's going, I mean, how would you not know if something was going shady going on? And it was continued behavior, by the way. Continued molestation, continued rape, whatever it is. Like, what else is there that was done that really could have been, that we need to go and keep an eye on? He wants to go ahead and pass the buck to somebody else. Oh, blame it on Nickelodeon, blame it on everybody else. And says he was the one that's going to be supporting Drake Bell. No. It's not like he went out of his way to go and help out. I'm not going to say he's complicit about Brian Peck's behavior, but he's not completely absolvent of it either.
Asking for leniency, and they knew that he was guilty. They knew he had confessed to some degree, and they still did this. That's baffling that adults would do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people know this, but Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are. And would you help me with my speech for the judge? And I said, of course. And I did. And he ended up going to prison and serving his time. And yeah, that was probably the darkest part of my career. And here's the kicker that I really don't get. After he got out of prison and was, to my knowledge, a registered sex offender, he was hired on a Disney Channel show. I don't understand.
Okay, let's unpack that real quick. The planned crying, what a fucking chef's kiss. The extra touch right there to put that part in. Fucking A, man. Let me tell you what. He quickly gets out of that. And let's throw Disney Channel under the bus because they hired him after the fact. Yeah. Okay, if that's true, that is fucked up, all right? He had the trouble saying the word, sexual predator, child predator. And then he goes, like, he's really just funneling off the guilt, funneling off the responsibility of what happened. Does anyone of the right mind think that this guy, I mean, he put this out here. It's not saying a whole lot. But I mean, do you think this guy, if somebody wants to go after him, they decide to use this as evidence in a court, in a trial of what he says? Like, was this something that, he even signed off with his lawyers to make sure that what he says here is going to be safe for him? Because I would think this guy needs to be protecting himself and also staying silent. But that's not what he did here. He decided to go ahead and open up about it. And then he tries to act like he's the good guy here. He's not. Just because you're realizing, oh shit, I'm going to get caught on something really bad. I'm going to get in some shit right now. I better do something about it. That's kind of a guilty way of getting forward. Dan Schneider, if he wants to go put out a statement, then put out statements through your PR, through management, through whatever company you're working with right now. You find lawyers to go and protect behind this, because the most important thing you would be thinking of right now is that you're going to get lawsuits thrown at you. After this right here, who else is going to come forward and start saying, hey, you know what? Class action suit. We're going to go after this guy. We're going to go after Nickelodeon. We're going to get some money on it. Because here's the other thing too. Some of these folks right now, if they're hurting for money, some of these child stars and some of these other people behind the scenes that are not continuing their careers because of what Dan Schneider did to them, and they can go ahead and put him out there and put him on a stake and burn Nickelodeon to the ground and get money from them at such a point of desperation for them, because Nickelodeon is a shell of its former self. Imagine, like for Dan Schneider, this was not a smart move to go out here and start talking and to open up. I don't care how planned this was. I would think any legal counsel would tell him, no, you shut up, Dan. And just because he's guilty of like his career being tarnished, right? His name being smeared among the press. And the fact that he wants to go ahead and be able to kind of say, well, he can work his way. He can manipulate his way to make himself look better because he needs to go and do some damage control. But he's doing it on his own. You might have had some consulting, a little bit of help on this, but you know what? This guy decided to go this route. But we know he did some stuff. We know it. I just think that you see a guy that feels guilty. He feels shame because, oh no, because he got caught. Not because of what he did. It's because he got caught. Now he's having to go in and do some damage control, spin things around to make it back into his favor. I mean, you are validating the documentary by doing that. You're validating everything that was being said. And because you think this, little tear here and there, a little bit of projecting the blame to other people, this is narcissistic, manipulative behavior from an older man who's just gotten really good at it. I'm just saying, I don't know if anyone else wants to believe that this guy is really like as smart as he is, or just believes he is like be able to go and get away with it all. But I'll take a little more of what was being written here and see what happens. By the way, 8 hours ago, this has only got 177,000 views so far. But that's because everybody else has been watching it on Twitter, on X. Like it's been pushed out everywhere else because it is the public square. People will go and hear that all together. So they're doing it that way. And they should, right? Like, why not? Hollywood Reporter already has 1.2 million views already on it. So everybody else is finding this on Twitter or TikTok, wherever else. And everybody's going to go after this. For me, yeah, this was a no-brainer for me to go and talk about this episode and bring this up and what he did and what he said. Yeah, this is not good for him. And by the way, all the press responds, apologizes, damning allegations. There's not a lot of damage that's being done on Dan Schneider. He's just being pointed out as being accused, but nobody's going after him. Like all the press, they're on his side. Who's protecting this guy? Who's protecting him? I would be seriously wondering who's on this guy's side as to why he's being protected. Who does he know? What does he know? There's all that. I would be really curious as to what comes of it. There's other stuff I could talk about this, but like I said, I'm going to keep it at 30 minutes. We're not going to go more than that. I'm going to leave it there. But now, of course, this show is going to get some virality. I want to hear your comments. I want to read your comments if we can next week on the program. But yeah, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, thanks for listening through the whole thing. And please comment, like, share, and subscribe. Make sure to just point it out because I want to go and read about what you say on next week's show. So by all means, if you're listening to this program, you're hearing it at the end, please comment and say what you think. Let it all out. Vent. You're mad as hell and you can't take it anymore. Say your piece about Dan Schneider and this Quiet on Set documentary, because you know what? Next week, the other two parts drop on Friday. I'll watch those. And we'll probably talk about this a little bit more next week. Might be focused again next week for all we know, especially if we get some comments. Because if I get some feedback, we're going to do a feedback show. And we're going to talk about the second half of what we learned about all this and see if Dan Schneider decides to be an idiot and go out there and talk even more about this, which is just not smart for him overall. But he did it. He decided, I'm going to go ahead and get in front of this. Well, it might just burn him before he knows it. Just saying. But we know now Dan Schneider, producer extraordinaire of Drake and Josh, The Amanda Show. It's not just a little. He is very much depraved and debaucherous. And not in a good way.